Captain Kronos, Vampire Hunter, is a 1974 British Gothic period vampire horror film with a little bit of swashbuckler action added in. Now, this was one of Hammer Film Productions' later releases of their original horror run, which started in around 1955 and ended approximately 1979. Now, in 1974, when this film was released, they did release 5 films that year. And after that, they only released 2 more films, one in 76 and one in 79, before shutting doors for quite some time. We're here today to talk about an over-the-top, thick, new 4K UHD release of Captain Kronos, Vampire Hunter. Now, this was released directly from Hammer, and this is a 4K UHD release, 5-disc special edition. Now, I want to ask you a question. When was the last time you saw like a ridiculous set like this thick for just a single film? Now, I've seen a couple recently that I got, like The Wicker Man and The Frighteners. I mean, look at how ridiculous. I mean, who has the audacity to put out things like this thick? I mean, this is over the top, but I got to tell you, I love it. This is amazing. And if you would do me a favor and go ahead and like this video, subscribe to my channel. I'm Dave Watkins, Watkins Films. Now, recently, well, not kind of recently, starting around 2007, Hammer Film Productions has been back at it. They've reopened and they've been quietly releasing some horror films. They're not like throwing it out there and being like, yo, this is Hammer, which they probably should, because some people probably recognize the Hammer name pretty good, but they've been fairly subtle about it. But they have released some pretty decent films. I've seen at least 3 of them. Like, for example, Let Me In. Let Me In is a remake of this Swedish film. It's a vampire film called Let the Right One In, with vampire kids, and both of them are quite good, and I think I prefer the Swedish one, but it's good that Hammer did do this remake for American audiences, and it has Richard Jenkins in it. They also did a film with Daniel Radcliffe called The Woman in Black, and they did a sequel to that doesn't have Radcliffe in it. And they also, I saw this one recently, it's a fairly like lower budget, but it's called The Lodge, and it's more psychological about some kids who are like kind of trapped in this lodge thing. But it's pretty effective, but it's also got Alicia Silverstone in it in a smaller part. The Captain Kronos Vampire Hunter, though, I first saw this film. Well, I first was aware of it when I was pretty young and too young to be watching it. It happened to be on my parents' TV. I kind of walked into the room, and it was like I saw the opening scene, and it was kind of scared me as a kid, because what happens is there's like a girl, like a blonde girl, out in the woods with her friend, and then her friend goes to go do something else, and then the blonde girl is sitting there, and then something approaches her, like a cloaked figure approaches her, and it's shot kind of cool the way that you don't see who it is, and then you see like reflections and things of this nature. But the girl looks up and she's like, "Who are you?" And then she looks at the person, and then she becomes like entranced by it, because it's a vampire. And then the vampire picks her up, and then it sucks the life out of her. And then when her friend comes back over to find her, like she's like, well, actually another guy comes up on a horse, who's one of the main characters. His name is Dr. Marcus, the character's name. But he comes up on a horse, and he sees the friend staring at her blonde friend, the friend that walked away, and then she's just staring at her in disbelief. And this, so Dr. Marcus walks up, and he's like, "What's going on?" And then the blonde girl turns around, and her face, she's still alive, but her face is like really old, like an older woman's playing her now. Like it's like she had her life sucked out of her. So that whole thing kind of stuck with me for a while. I was like, man, that is like really disturbing. But that's the way the vampires operate in this film. They're in this world, in the Captain Kronos world. There are different types of vampires. This is like a life force sucking vampire. They don't necessarily suck blood, though there is some blood in the film, but they really just suck your life away from you. And this is fatal to the victims. They may be still alive when they find them, but they die soon after, typically. So clearly I didn't watch the whole film when I was that young, and I don't remember exactly when I saw the whole film for the first time. Maybe a few years later, but I'm not certain on that. But I did much later, and it's even much later now than it seems. I did get a DVD copy of the film, And I want to show you this thing. And look at this cover. Now, what's up with this cover? I got to ask you that. Anyone who's seen the movie is like, what? Because we know this is not Captain Kronos. This is Dr. Marcus. Now, I'm not sure who designed the cover, what the hell they were thinking, but like, yeah, this is not this is not it. But this is the DVD version of the film, and I saw it for the first time, and I don't know exactly when it was, maybe 10 years ago or something like that. But this is the first release, I believe, where it was properly done and overly properly done. Maybe they'll eventually release a standard release of this film, which for the mass audiences. But this one is a pretty awesome version of it from Hammer, and we're going to talk about this 4K transfer here in a bit because they did a great restoration of the film. But back to the plot, and enter Captain Kronos and his trusty sidekick, Grost. Professor Grost, who is kind of his sidekick, but he's also kind of maybe a mentor type of character. He's an older guy, and he's got a hunchback, he's very smart, intelligent guy who has been studying how to fight different types of vampires, and he's always trying to test things and figuring out what they need to do. And that's one thing. Together they kind of come up with a plan. They never jump into anything like without knowing what they're doing. They try to figure everything out first. The first time we see Captain Kronos, they come up on. He's got a horse. Grost is on his the horse's carriage, and then it kind of. The camera goes in onto the blanket on the back of Captain Kronos' horse, and we see the Kronos, we hear this K that's on the back of the horse. And when we first see that in this particular version, this 4K version, it looks amazing, just like the texture of that cloth and just seeing the Captain Kronos symbol. That's a cool looking shot. But then as they're on their way to this town where these vampire things are happening. They're on there because Dr. Marcus has called him. He's a good friend of Captain Kronos. But as they're coming, they see a girl who is in a pillory. A pillory is like one of those, like, those wood things when they put your head and your arms in here, and she's like this, and she's been put on display for doing some kind of satanic or what they consider to be some kind of Sabbath type of dance. And Kronos is like, why are you here? And she's like, oh, they caught me dancing or whatever. And so he takes his sword out and he goes, whoosh! And then it like cuts the pillory open, and then they release her. And then after that, her name is Carla, played by Caroline Munro. I think that's how you pronounce her name. But she was in several Hammer films, like this one and Dracula 1972 AD. I believe that was the other one. And she also was in the Sinbad movie, which wasn't by Hammer, but she has a pretty extensive list of films that she's been in. But they let Carla out, and she decides to join them. And she's a very, very eager. She really likes Captain Kronos himself. Is a pretty interesting character. He seems very laid back and calm, and sometimes even a little bit of a detachment from what's going on. But he also occasionally seems lazy. Like when they get to do the camp, he goes and he's like lounged out on his blankets or whatever, while Grost and here Carla has to do all the cooking and all this other stuff, and she's like, what? Why is he over there not doing anything? And he's like, oh, he's preparing. He's got to prepare for whatever he's going to do with the vampires, but which is hilarious. I think. I mean, it's funny that he's got to keep in his headspace. So when it's time to fight, and that's the thing about Kronos, is you wouldn't expect him to be a capable fighter, but when it comes down to it, he is quite capable indeed. But then they get into town, and then they meet up with Dr. Marcus. And there's also some there's a higher class family in town, maybe some aristocrats who have a fairly nice house with their their family logo all over the place. They're called the Durwards, I think that's their name. But they're very suspicious. Once you see them for the first time, you're like, all of a sudden it's showing this aristocratic type of family in a carriage, and they've got like an older woman with them who seems to be wearing a mask, and all that seems a little suspicious. And I gotta tell you, it has something to do with the plot. But I'm not going to necessarily go into the whole plot. I will say it does kind of switch between some swashbuckling stuff. Like for instance, there's these in the tavern. which it cuts to this tavern, and there's this character named Caro there who's been, he's like him, and he's got some thugs with him. Somebody's hired him to be there, and he's in the tavern being a bully. Someone's like, he makes one guy leave, and it just cuts them randomly. But later on, when Kronos and Grost and Carla come into I don't think Carla actually comes in, but like they're in, she may be in there, but they come into the bar. Then these guys decide to try to provoke Kronos into a fight, and you see like Caro fight one time before. So when you see Kronos fight him, it's a completely different scenario, and that's a pretty cool scene. Now, as far as the violence in the film, it doesn't get as violent as you would expect, but it was apparently a big deal at the time because they granted a rated R rating for and there's some sexuality in it, but nothing too graphic in any of the areas. And that's one thing about the film in general. It's never quite as exciting as you would think it could be, but I do appreciate the film. It has a lot more subtleties to it than you would expect, but I do, and it is a kind of a slow burn on the story. Now there are a few swashbuckling scenes where they sword fight, and they're fairly well directed. Not as good as, say, like in the original Robin Hood, where Errol Flynn and Basil Rathbone doing their sword fighting, but it's pretty decent sword fighting for the swashbuckler type of film. As far as the vampire rules in this film, they are a little different than what you would expect. Now, Hammer oftentimes would shoot day for night, like scenes that were supposed to be night or day, but I don't think that's necessarily going on here. I think that there's a lot of exterior day stuff, and I don't think it's supposed to be night. I think these vampires can go out during the day. They don't seem to be affected by sunlight, as far as I can tell. But when they go out in the day, they tend to be cloaked or have masks on or whatever, so they're not necessarily getting direct sunlight, but you never see them. You don't know what's going on with the sunlight. Their powers are able to hypnotize people, and then they drain their blood, and those seem to be their main problems. At one point, one of the vampires turns into a bat, so they can turn into bats. As far as the main thing that can kill them is the cross that Captain Kronos and Grost discover while they're doing their trials, and they do figure it out that these particular vampires, like, the cross is the thing. And they actually get a big metal cross, and then they forge it into a sword. Apparently, it may not even be the cross. It may be the actual metal that's being used. They turned the cross into a sword, and that sword is later used in a fight against the vampires. Captain Kronos is played by German actor Horst Janssen. Now, I haven't seen... He has a large filmography of mostly German films, so I haven't really seen him in anything else. Not to discredit his work. I'm sure some of those films are probably really, really badass. But he did a lot of German films after this, and he is a German actor. Unfortunately for this film, he had to be dubbed because he has a pretty thick German accent, or he had a very thick German accent, so they had to have another actor dub him. I do like his demeanor in the film, the way the actor plays him, even if his voice isn't used. I do like the way that he does it, and it is fairly entertaining. And the actor John Carson that plays Professor Groust, I really like his demeanor as well, and just the way that those two actors work together very well. And of course, like the Carla character played by Caroline Munro, like, I think she is so good in this. I really something about her eyes and the way that she is able to really focus she's really mesmerizing in this part, and just I really like the way that she just kind of becomes part of the group for a while, but later on in the film she puts herself in danger, and I think that there's a part where the vampire comes on her, and just I really like her reaction to becoming possessed by the vampire. But I'm not going to go into complete plot details about everything that happens, but I will say that the movie's fun. It may not be exactly as dynamic or as exciting as you might think from a film called Captain Kronos Vampire Hunter. And apparently they had intended to have this as more of a series. There's going to be more Captain Kronos adventures, which would have been great. But they, as it just didn't happen. The Hammer Studios was at their end, and it just never went forward. Apparently, I think there's a comic book adaptation of this, which is probably it would have been pretty cool to see that ongoing. But let's take a look. With no further ado, let's take a look at this set. So the outside cover of, all right, which is cool. Now on the inside here, here's what it looks like. We got a lot of the characters here. We got the Durwards. This is a guy who shows up later. He's one of the Durwards as well. And there's the sister. There's a sister and brother, Sarah and Paul. This is Sarah. There's Captain Kronos with a sword. So this is significantly better than this, though. I think this is the ticket right here. This is actually my favorite one. Now here you got Captain Kronos front and center, and you got Carla front and center, because those are the best characters. Plus Professor Grost. So you got your main dudes there. You don't have I don't have anything against Dr. Marcus. I think he's a great character, and what happens to him in the plot is pretty good. But he's not the main character. He is an important character, but he's more supporting. Matter of fact, he didn't even make it on to this cover, unfortunately. But there's some vampires and all that. So I mean, this is it. This is a great cover. I don't hate this one. This one's cool too. But it's an alternate cover. On the side here, we got the Kronos symbol, Captain Kronos, Vampire Hunter from Hammer. So awesome. Now we have a booklet. Captain Kronos, Vampire Hunter. This is a graphic novel. Okay, I guess I should have looked at this. But look, this is the graphic novel, the comic book version of the film. This is awesome. Look at that. The horror classic as a graphic novel. That's amazing right there. I didn't even realize it was in here. Here we got some posters. I'm gonna guess this is probably a reversible poster, and it is. All right, so we have. This is now Scream Factory did. I don't have it, but they have put out a Blu-ray version of Captain Kronos and Vampire Hunter, and this is the poster they use, and this is the original poster, which is pretty solid. I don't know if it necessarily sells the film, but it's pretty solid. And here's this version of it that's on the outside of that slip box, on the reverse side of the slip box. So those are cool posters. We have some postcards. We'll take a look at these things. Maybe if I can get it open. I was planning on opening it up a lot quicker than that. So we got. Here's Captain Kronos with one of the victims. That guy gets ran over by a carriage and his arm gets ripped off, which is a pretty cool sequence. Here's Kronos meeting with he's got Grost and Marcus. That's when the first meeting when they first get to town, and then they meet with Marcus and they start talking about what's going on with everything. Here's a later sword fight between Kronos and one of the Monroes. Not Monroes, the Durwards. And here's another version of it. Another shot of that. Here's another shot here with Grost, Marcus, and Captain Kronos. There's a close-up of Kronos himself. And, all right, this is a cool shot. I like, you got, like, Carla and Kronos. They're doing some kind of test out in the woods. And here he is with the sword. Those are decent enough cards. I would like to see a little something more dynamic with them, but it's cool that they're in here. And here we have another booklet. Now, this is the movie booklet. This is a booklet that has essays and just a lot of information about the film itself. So those items, these two books that are in here are amazing. That they have these two pretty thick books inside of this collection. Now let's get into what we have here, which these are the disc. There are 5 discs. There you go. You got 5 discs. So you have this is the widescreen and the full screen version of the film in the UK. Now that is the 4K UHD version, and then this is the US version. And there's 3 different versions of the film here. At first I thought it might be different cuts, but it's not. They're all the same cut. They're just different formats, different different. Like this one's like 185.1, and then the other two one's actually the original way it was shot, I guess, was 137.1, which is like a full screen version, and it has bars on the side. So these other 2 versions are actually cropped in versions of the film for the US and the in the UK theatrical versions. But it's odd that they shot it full screen. And then we have Blu-rays of, we have this, the Blu-rays are region free. I hadn't tested them, but it says they're region free. So there's a Blu-ray of the same things, and then there's a disc here. The last disc is a special features disc. It's a great set. Here's some more pictures on the outside pieces here. There's Marcus. That's one of the vampires. And on the back, it actually opens up to see like a full range. There's Kronos, Grost, and Carla. And I believe if you open this all the way up, it actually shows a full scene. It's like a panoramic scene of the woods. There are a lot of wood scenes in this film, and the woods look terrific in this 4K transfer. So yeah, let's talk about the transfer a little bit. Now I'm going to read a little bit from this book about the transfer. I'm going to probably paraphrase some of it because there is a lot to be said. But it says, starting with a new restoration begins with tracking down the best available material to scan and restore. In the case of Captain Kronos, Vampire Hunter, this meant the 35mm original negative, and that was documented as being held by the USA by Paramount Studios. So they've got the 35mm original negative was scanned on a director scanner at a 4K resolution. And as a result, the image was restored using MTI and Phoenix, removing dirt and effects and correcting other issues like density or color fluctuations. It was then graded for high dynamic range, which is HDR, with Dolby Vision. Using Resolve software, and care was taken to retain the original look of the films. For example, blue tinted night sequences, while using the HDR to show off the full range of color and the detail in the dark and light areas of the image. 3 versions of the film are presented here, which we talked about before. So they've clearly done a lot of work on it. Now, they didn't change. They try to keep the flavor of the film. They didn't try to grade it in a different way. They try to keep it, and it looks very organic. It looks very close to the way it was originally supposed to be. But the HDR, it adds a lot to it. I think the HDR really brings out like flesh tones, and it makes things just look really very, very, very natural looking. There is a lot of grain in this film, is because it was shot on film, and over time there's grain. Now, some people don't like the grain, but you don't necessarily want to remove it. You remove the grain, you lose a lot of detail on the faces and the textures, and there is a lot of great detail to be seen here. Now, you might have a trouble seeing it through the grain, but the detail is here, and it all looks fantastic, especially the woods outside in the woods shots, and even like the castle scenes look, I guess it's a castle. It's more like a really big house, but those scenes look really good. The interior sets to those scenes, it all looks terrific, and they did a damn good job of restoring this film. I don't know if we necessarily needed all 3 of the versions. We definitely didn't need them. They could have put them all those on the one Blu-ray instead of putting them all on different Blu-rays with 5 discs. But it would have been cool to see a different cut of the film. That's what I thought we might have been getting to begin with. But I think for what apparently isn't a different cut of the film, there's only one cut of the film, and that's what we got. So that's why we don't have the alternate cut. But let's go ahead and rate the film. I'm going to rate this on a scale from 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest, 5 being the best. Now, I'm going to give Captain Kronos Vampire Hunter a pretty strong 3.5 star rating, leaning towards a 4. Like I said before, I think that I do like the deliberate pacing, and they had to work with what they had, but it's not quite as exciting as you would expect it to be. But they do a good job of what's done. I would have liked to have seen the adventures continue further past this. As far as what Hammer's done here, I'm going to give them a 5 star rating. This is an amazing set, and they went above and beyond with it. Now, if you would do me a favor and go ahead and like this video, subscribe to my channel. I'm Dave Watkins. Thanks for watching.